Let the day be done now. Whatever it asked of you, whatever it took, it is finished. You do not need to carry it any further tonight. You can set it down. Right here, right now.
Feel the surface beneath you. Feel how it holds you without condition, without checking your credentials, without needing to know how the day went before it accepts your weight. The bed simply holds, and so does the night. Bring your attention to your breath. You do not have to change it. Just notice it moving, in and out, quiet and automatic. Your body has been doing this all day long without your help. It has been keeping you alive through everything, without supervision, without praise, without needing a reason. Let your shoulders soften. They have been holding a lot. Let your jaw unclench. Let the space behind your eyes go wide and still. There is nothing to solve right now. There is nothing to prepare for. The only thing happening is this: you, breathing, in a safe place, at the end of a day. Notice the sounds around you. They are not threats. They are just the world settling into its nighttime hum. Let them pass through. Let them be part of the background, distant and soft. Your hands can open. Your feet can stop bracing. Every muscle that has been helping you navigate and manage and perform can have a rest now. You gave what you gave today. You showed up in the ways you showed up. That is done. And somewhere underneath all of that effort, underneath the doing and the responding and the showing up, there is something waiting quietly. Something that has been there all day, unhurried, untroubled, unscored. Something that does not rise or fall with how the day went. Tonight we are going to rest very close to it. We are going to let it come forward. We are going to let it remind you of something you already know somewhere deep but may have forgotten in the noise. Something about who you are when you strip away everything you have done or not done. Something about worth, not earned worth, not measured worth, just worth, as a fact, as a ground. You do not have to work for what is coming tonight. You do not have to earn it. Just breathe. Just be here. Just let yourself be held. There is a tally running in most people. It runs quietly, like a program in the background of a computer, a process you did not consciously open and cannot easily close. You might not hear it in so many words, but it is there, calculating, adjusting, reviewing the day's data, and returning a verdict. Did I do enough? Was I good enough in that conversation? Did I say the wrong thing at the wrong moment? Am I too much or not enough? Am I ahead or behind where I should be by now? Better or worse than I was last year? Rising or falling in other people's estimation? Loved genuinely or merely tolerated with patience? Seen accurately for what I bring? Or dangerously misunderstood in ways I have not yet discovered? The tally processes data from every interaction, from the way someone's eyes moved during a meeting, the tiny flicker that might mean approval, or might mean doubt, and which you analyzed for longer than you would like to admit. From the number on the screen that tells you how many people engaged with what you made, from the silence that followed a question you thought was smart, from the compliment you received but immediately suspected of being insincere or obligatory or smaller than it should have been given what you actually contributed, from the raise that arrived but that someone else received more of, from the face in the mirror on a morning when you are tired, from the age you are versus the age at which you thought you would have figured things out by now. This is exhausting, not in a dramatic way, in a slow, cumulative, cellular way that accumulates over months and years without ever announcing itself clearly. The calculation takes real energy. The monitoring takes genuine cognitive load. There is a reason people can spend an entire day sitting at a desk and arrive at night feeling physically hollowed out. A tiredness that has nothing to do with the body and everything to do with the constant self-appraisal that ran underneath every task, every conversation, every moment of visibility. They have been running the tally for hours without stopping. They have been auditing themselves in real time all day without a break and without a closing bell. And the audit never clears. And here is the thing about this tally that most people do not see clearly until they look directly at it. It never settles. That is not a bug. That is the design. A tally built on conditional worth, a tally that always reserves the right to withdraw its approval, is not malfunctioning when it refuses to clear. It is doing exactly what it was constructed to do. Which raises the question of who constructed it, and the answer, for almost everyone, begins a long time ago, in a small room, in the presence of people who meant well and who were working with what they had been given. A child arrives in the world without a score. They come in whole, demanding, certainly, loud, often, inconvenient in approximately 100 ways, but unscored. They cry and no one says the crying was insufficient. They reach for something and no one grades the reach. For a brief, extraordinary time, they simply exist, and that existence is, to almost everyone around them, something close to a miracle. Pure presence, pure enoughness, not yet measured, not yet conditional. Then the mechanisms begin, not from cruelty but from necessity, from the ordinary, well-intentioned business of raising a person to function in a social world. The grade on the drawing, the clap for the performance, the conspicuous silence when the performance is poor, the gold star, the gentle disappointment that lands more heavily than any punishment, the praise that flows when they behave well, and the subtle withdrawal that comes when they do not. These are not weapons. They are the ordinary instruments of childhood socialization, but they carry a message embedded quietly in the reward structure, a message the child absorbs, not as philosophy, but as reality. Your worth is conditional. It can be earned. It can be lost. We will tell you, with our eyes and our voices and our presence or absence, how you are doing. The child, being a brilliant learner, the most capable learning system we have ever encountered, absorbs this entirely. They learn to monitor. They learn to read the room. They calibrate themselves to the signals of approval and disapproval that tell them whether they are, at this particular moment, enough. And they carry this learning forward into adolescence, where worth is measured in belonging and social standing and the confirmation that comes from being chosen, into adulthood, where the instruments become more sophisticated, but the underlying logic remains unchanged. The adult version of the grade on the drawing is the performance review. The adult version of the disappointed look is the partner who goes quiet in a particular way you have learned to dread. The adult version of the gold star is the promotion, the recognition, the follower count, the opinion of the person in the room whose assessment functions as currency. The instruments change. The habit of measurement does not. And the tally can never fully clear because it was never designed to. A system of conditional worth functions only when the conditions are never permanently met. If they were met, and met finally, the measurement would stop, the performance would end, and the leverage that conditional approval provides would dissolve. The measuring continues because it must. And so you continue running the program, long after you have left the house where it was installed, long after the original programmers are gone or changed or have forgotten they ever wrote the code. But here is the reframe that tonight is built around. Worth is not a variable. Worth is a constant. Your worth is not the thing that fluctuates with the score. It is not the output of the calculation. Your worth is the ground beneath the calculation. It existed before the tally began. It will exist when the tally goes quiet. It is not improved by achievement. It is not diminished by failure. It cannot be added to by any recognition, and it cannot be subtracted from by any disappointment. It was present in the child before the first grade was given, before the first clap or silence. It is present in you now, exactly as you are, regardless of everything today contained. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist and writer in Vienna when the Nazis came for him. They took everything external: his home, his work, the manuscript he had spent years writing, his wife, who did not survive. They took him to Auschwitz and then to other camps, and they stripped from him every social identity, every credential, every constructed layer of a life built piece by piece across 4 decades. Every role, every title, every confirmation from the outside world that he was someone worth accounting for. And yet, in those camps, something could not be located, could not be found and removed. He wrote about it later, in a book that has been read by millions of people in the decades since. He called it the last human freedom, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Beneath even that freedom, he observed something in certain prisoners, a quality of interior dignity that had not been touched by the stripping, not defiance, not denial, not performance, just an interior presence that the entire machinery of dehumanization could not reach, because it did not live anywhere the machinery could access. It did not live in the role or the title or the accomplishment. It lived somewhere prior to all of that, somewhere the guards did not have the key to. That is what we are pointing towards tonight. Not the worth that must be validated by external systems, the worth that simply is. Not the score, the field beneath the score. Not the tally and its outcome, but the life underneath the tally that continues, that persists, that is simply present in a way that no amount of measuring or judging or withdrawing approval can actually touch.
That part of you exists. It is present right now as you lie here, and no day, however hard, however far short of your own standard, touches it. The calculation was never the truth about you. It was a very persistent, very well-rehearsed story. And tonight, in the quiet, you can begin to feel the difference between the story and what is actually underneath it. Think about what low worth looks like in an ordinary day, not in crisis, not in collapse, just on a Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of a life that from the outside might look entirely fine. It looks like saying yes when every part of you is saying no, not because you genuinely want to help, though you may frame it to yourself that way and may even partly believe the framing, but because saying no feels like a risk you cannot quite afford. It feels like the kind of move that costs you standing. So you agree to the meeting you do not have bandwidth for. You take on the project that will cost you 3 weekends. You show up for the obligation that was never actually yours to carry, and you carry it pleasantly. And you feel, underneath the pleasantness, a resentment you cannot quite justify to yourself because you were the one who agreed. The agreeing came from the deep background belief that your value is contingent on your availability, that the people around you are keeping an informal count of the times you showed up versus the times you did not, and that your place in their esteem is something you are perpetually re-earning, and that refusal is one of the ways you lose points. So you say yes, again, and you are a little more depleted than you were before, and no one sees it, and the tally updates to include another proof that you are a good person. And tomorrow morning the calculation starts again from the same place. Low worth looks like over-preparing, not the good kind of preparation that comes from genuine care about doing something well, not the preparation of a craftsperson who wants to honor the work, but the frantic, escalating, never quite enough kind that comes from fear. The person who rewrites the email 7 times before sending it and immediately wishes they could revise it again.
The person who rehearses the casual conversation in the shower, running through possible turns it might take, and preparing responses in advance. The person who builds contingency plans for situations with a negligible probability of occurring because their deepest anxiety is not the situation itself, but the possibility of being caught inadequate within it, of being visible without the armor of thorough preparation and found wanting underneath. The over-preparing is not about the task. The task is often something manageable. The over-preparing is about covering every possible gap through which the verdict might enter. And because that fear has no natural ceiling, the preparation has none either. Low worth looks like deflecting compliments. Someone says something kind and true about you, something they genuinely mean, and instead of receiving it, instead of letting it settle into you the way it was offered, something catches it mid-air and sends it back before it can land. Oh, it was nothing. I just got lucky with the timing. Anyone could have done it. I had a lot of help from people around me. From the outside, this resembles humility, and it wears humility's face convincingly. But from the inside, it is something else entirely. It is the inability to let evidence that contradicts the tally actually register as evidence. If someone says that was extraordinary, and you simply said thank you and let yourself believe it, the tally would have to update in the positive direction. And the tally, by design, resists updating in the positive direction. The tally is a system built to perpetuate insufficiency, and receiving a compliment fully is a threat to the system. So the system deflects. Automatically, smoothly, and you are left a little more alone inside the exchange than you were before. And the person who offered the kindness is left with the faint sense that you did not quite trust what they said. Low worth looks like performing rather than being. Not the conscious, intentional performance of an artist or speaker who has chosen to frame and does so with craft and awareness, but the involuntary, continuous performance of a person who does not fully trust that who they are, unfiltered, is acceptable in a room. Who calibrates their personality in real time to whoever they are speaking to? Who monitors the response to what they are saying even while they are saying it, adjusting the presentation based on the signals they are reading? Who leaves most social encounters feeling not genuinely connected but somewhat wrung out, and who replays what they said later with a faint unease, scanning for the moment where the performance slipped or the wrong thing was revealed. This is not a failure of social skill. This is what it looks like to move through the world when you believe, underneath everything, that the authentic version of you requires editing before it is fit for public viewing, that the unmanaged self is too much or not enough for the room. And low worth looks like the inability to rest, not insomnia exactly, though insomnia is often its companion, but the more pervasive, daily experience of not being able to be still without guilt, the leisure that requires justification, the Saturday afternoon that is technically free, but that does not feel free, that feels like borrowed time, like a deviation from the correct mode of being, which is productive and forward-moving and generating evidence of worth. The vacation where the body is present and the mind is still at the desk. The evening walk that doubles as problem-solving because the mind cannot find permission to simply be a body moving through evening air without an agenda. Rest is not morally neutral when worth is conditional. Rest must be earned first, and since the earning is never fully finished, the rest is never fully permitted. All of this lives in the body, not as a metaphor. The body is where the story of conditional worth is stored and enacted, day after day, without announcement, without ceremony, in the quiet physical language of tension and readiness and weight. Feel your shoulders right now, in this moment. Where are they actually? Are they fully released, simply hanging from their joints with the weight of the arms pulling them gently down? Or are they held, slightly raised, slightly forward, braced against something that has not arrived yet, and perhaps will not arrive? The chronic tightness in the shoulders that so many people carry as their ordinary, unremarkable baseline is not merely a postural problem. It is the body keeping itself in a state of readiness, on call, anticipating the next moment of assessment, and making sure the posture of competence is in place before that moment arrives. The jaw carries it too. The clenched jaw discovered in the night is the body still running the tally after the day has technically ended, still processing the assessments, still preparing the defense for a verdict that may never formally arrive. The gut carries it in the form of the knot that settles in before a difficult conversation, and sometimes does not fully release even after it is over, as if the body does not quite trust that the exchange is finished, that the score is final, that no further adjustment will be required. The chest carries it in the tightness that arrives when something is at stake, when you are about to be evaluated, when the verdict is pending. The back holds the chronic ache that does not come from lifting anything heavy, but from carrying, all day, in the soft interior of the body, the accumulated weight of the unsettled question of whether you are enough. The body is not separate from the story. The body is where the story lives, and when you let the shoulders drop and the jaw release and the breath slow and deepen tonight, you are not just relaxing muscles. You are setting down the tally, giving the body permission to stand down, telling the system the evaluation is over for tonight, and there is nothing left to defend or prepare or justify. And yet there are moments when the measurement stops, not because you made it stop, not because you did the work or achieved the insight, but because something else broke through. A moment of such complete presence that the tally simply did not have room to run. The morning coffee before everything begins. Not coffee as caffeine delivery, not coffee as the functional start to the managed day, but the specific experience of warmth in the hands, and steam rising, and the smell, and the quiet of a house before anyone else is awake, before the phone has established the day's agenda. Just the mug and the morning and something in you that is simply here, not evaluating itself, just present in an ordinary kitchen in a way that feels, for those few unguarded seconds, almost unbearably uncomplicated. The light that comes through a particular window at a particular time of year, autumn usually, when the angle is changing and the light has a quality it only has for a few weeks before it shifts again. You stop. You watch the way it moves across the floor or catches the dust in the air and turns it briefly golden. And for those few seconds, you are not a person with a tally. You are simply someone watching light do what light does, illuminate without preference, without checking first who deserves the illumination. The child asleep. If you have ever watched a child in the fullness of sleep, you may recognize the feeling of looking at something so completely and unself-consciously itself that it produces a kind of ache. They have given themselves entirely to rest, and their whole small body is the picture of something that has never once questioned whether it deserves to occupy the space it occupies. And looking at them, something in you loosens. The witness in you sees the natural state and remembers, briefly and viscerally, what it feels like to exist without the tally. Rain on a roof at night. That particular sound, the steady, unhurried percussion of water on a surface above you, settles most people in a way that is hard to explain rationally. The world is doing what the world does. It does not need you for this. The rain falls on the people who have earned everything they have, and on the people who have earned nothing. It falls without preference, without assessment. It is simply here, as you are simply here, and for a moment both of you are just existing in the same dark, with no one keeping score. These moments are glimpses of the actual ground. They are moments when the story of conditional worth pauses long enough for something truer to become briefly visible. The tally goes quiet, and you are still there, still breathing, still whole, still unmistakably you. And that self, the one that is still there when the measurement stops, is what we mean by intrinsic worth, not the score, the one who is there regardless of the score, not the tally, the life underneath the tally, which continues regardless, which was there before the tally began and will be there when the tally finally goes silent. Now, consider this very slowly. There has never been another you, not in the entire history of this planet, not in the billions of years during which life has been generating life, during which cells divided and organisms adapted and creatures moved from water to land and developed hands and language and music and mathematics and the capacity to sit in the dark wondering about their own worth. Not your twin, if you have one, because twins share biology, but not the interior life that forms in response to experience. Not your closest friend, who navigates their own singular and unrepeatable labyrinth. You, specifically, with your exact history, the precise sequence of things that happened to you, and the specific ways you made meaning of them. Your exact way of reading a room when you walk into it. Your exact private vocabulary for your own interior states. The specific combination of what makes you laugh and what breaks your heart, and what makes you stop and look longer than you meant to. What you notice that no one else in a room seems to notice. That specific, unrepeatable combination has never existed before. It will never exist again. Not once. Not anywhere.
This is a factual statement about rarity, and rarity, in almost every domain of human valuation, outside of the assessment of people by other people, is treated as constitutive of worth. The rare mineral, the rare manuscript, the rare creature that almost did not survive. Rarity is not incidental to value. It is the value. And you are, in the most literal sense, the rarest possible version of a thing. There is exactly one of you in the history of the universe. There will only ever be one.
Consider the things in the world that operate without conditions. Light does not ask whether you deserve to be illuminated before it lands on your face. Gravity does not withhold itself from people who have not yet demonstrated sufficient achievement. The air, the oxygen moving through you right now in the dark, does not distinguish between the productive and the fallow. The ocean does not check your credentials before it offers the sound of itself to whoever is near enough to hear. These are the fundamental structures that support all existence, and they operate without conditions, without a tally, without a review. They simply are. And they offer what they are without asking first who deserves it. And you are not separate from these things. You are an expression of the same underlying process that produces light and gravity and breath, and none of those things need to prove that they deserve to exist. They simply exist. And so do you, unconditionally, without needing to make a case. The love a parent feels for a child in the first hours of that child's life is perhaps the closest thing available in ordinary human experience to what we are describing. The child has done nothing, cannot speak or perform or demonstrate competence, has no history of good behavior, no track record. And yet the love is absolute, complete. What it is responding to is not achievement or potential. It is simply, you are here, you exist, and that is already, in itself, more than enough. That love is not a mistake of early parenthood corrected later by sober realities. It is the truth, briefly visible, before the world's measurement systems come online and begin teaching both parent and child to layer conditions over it. The conditions are real and functional, but they are layered over something that was already there. Something still there now, in you, underneath everything, waiting. Her name for tonight is Mara. She was in her late 30s when this story takes place, though the story had been building far longer. She had spent her adult life constructing something impressive by almost any external measure, moving through demanding roles in a field she was genuinely skilled at, advancing steadily, earning the recognition that comes to people who combine real ability with a relentless willingness to work. She had been promoted. She had been publicly acknowledged at industry events. She had received, over the years, a considerable quantity of the external validation her industry had to offer. And she had never, not once, felt that she had arrived. There was always a next proof required, always a next threshold whose crossing would finally make the case for her value definitively and allow her to rest inside it, without the restlessness that came when she slowed down and was quiet. She told herself this was ambition, and it was, partly. She told herself it was high standards, and that was true too. But underneath both of those real and reasonable things, if she was willing to look directly at it, was something older and less comfortable. She was working to prove something. She was not entirely sure what. She was not entirely sure to whom, since the audience had long since become interior. But the proving never felt finished, and so the working never felt finished. And she arrived at most evenings tired in a way that sleep did not fully repair. Her mother was a woman who had loved her completely, and who had also, in the particular way of her generation and her own history, made clear that standards mattered, performance had consequences, that approval was something maintained through achievement and good behavior. The love was always present, but it had conditions woven through it that Mara had absorbed so young and so thoroughly that she could not separate the love from the conditions. She had built her entire adult life on the assumption that the two were inseparable, that love required performance, and performance maintained love, and any deviation put the love at risk. One evening her mother called. No occasion. They talked about ordinary things. And then, in the middle of it, her mother said something Mara did not know what to do with. She said, "I am so proud of you." And then she added, not for anything specific, not for the work or the title or any of it, just of you, because of who you are, because you exist, and you are mine, and I love you. And I just wanted you to know that, tonight. Mara thanked her and changed the subject because she genuinely did not know what else to do with what had just been offered. But after she hung up, she sat very still for a long time. Because something in those words had found a crack in the architecture and moved through it. Just of you. Not for anything specific, just because you exist. She recognized, sitting there, that her entire professional life had been built partly in response to a message she had absorbed from this same woman decades earlier, a message about conditional approval, about performance as the entry fee for love. And now this same woman was offering something that had perhaps always been underneath the conditions, something Mara had been too busy performing to receive. The unconditional version, the version that had been there all along, waiting for her to slow down enough to take it in. She did not transform overnight. These things do not move that way. But over the months that followed, she noticed something slowly shifting in the texture of her days. She would be in a meeting, performing, calibrating, monitoring how she was landing, and something would surface briefly, like a hand on her shoulder. Just a view, not for anything specific.
And the calibrating would loosen, only slightly at first, and she would let herself simply be a person in the room, rather than a presentation being managed by a person in the room. She began to notice that people responded to this with something warmer than they had responded to the performance, as if they had been waiting for the real version to arrive and were finally relieved to meet her. She still worked hard. She still cared about the work, genuinely and deeply. But the work changed its character. It was no longer the proof. It was no longer the thing she did in order to deserve to be in the room. It was the thing she did because she was skilled at it and found meaning in it. And it was one expression of a life she was actually inhabiting, rather than perpetually auditioning for. The recognition that came that year felt different from all the recognition that had come before. Not because it was larger, because she needed it less. And needing it less, she could actually receive it, let it be simply a good thing, without immediately scanning for the next threshold she would need to cross to maintain her standing. She noticed around the same time that she had started saying no to things more easily, not with drama, not with elaborate explanation, just with the calm honesty of someone who had begun to trust that her presence in the world was not contingent on her perpetual availability. And people did not leave. The relationships did not dissolve. The work did not stop valuing her. What changed was only the quality of her presence within all of it, which became less managed and more simply herself. And that self turned out to be more than sufficient for every room she entered. That is what it looks like when the ground shifts under a life. Not a fanfare, not a revelation, just the quiet, radical relief of discovering that the thing you were working so hard to earn was never actually in question. His name for tonight is Daniel. He was the kind of person who committed fully to whatever he committed to, and when he decided in his early 30s to build a business from essentially nothing, he brought to that decision every ounce of stubborn and particular energy that such things require. He did not look up from the building for a very long time. The first years were pure survival. The years after that were growth. The years after that were the exhausting, ongoing work of maintaining something that had become real and had people depending on it. Through all of it, his family was present in the background of his life, his wife and 2 children growing at their ordinary pace in the peripheral vision of a man who was always facing forward, always looking at the next problem. He told himself and his wife that it was temporary. The sacrifice of evenings and weekends and the full, undivided presence that a family deserves was a finite loan being taken against a future in which there would be time for everything. Time to be the father he genuinely wanted to be. Time to take the trips that kept being deferred. Time to be in the house on a weeknight doing nothing in particular and being fully, unhurriedly present for it. He believed this genuinely.
It was not a lie he told to cover a choice he had actually made. He genuinely intended the deferred version of himself to arrive once the building phase was finished. But later had a way of becoming now, and then immediately becoming later again. Each threshold crossed revealed a new one. Each problem solved uncovered a new problem. The children grew at the pace children grow, which respects no one's timeline and waits for nothing to be finished. His daughter moved through an entire phase of her childhood during years he was not fully present for. His son began to have a sense of humor that was distinctly and recognizably his own, a way of seeing and saying things that everyone who encountered him found immediately delightful. Daniel noticed this from doorways, on his way to or from something that needed him more urgently at that moment. One Saturday, a Saturday he had protected and declared and committed to keeping genuinely free, he found himself in the garden with his son, who was 12. They were sitting in the afternoon sun, doing nothing in particular. His son was comfortable the way 12-year-olds are comfortable when they trust the situation completely, loosely and easily, without agenda. And Daniel was sitting too, or trying to, fighting the list that kept assembling itself in the back of his mind, trying to be in the garden, finding it harder than it should have been. And his son said, without looking up, without any occasion for it, in the offhand way of someone simply reporting their experience of the moment, "This is nice, Dad." Just that. "This is nice, Dad." And something happened in Daniel that he would find difficult to describe afterward, something not quite grief, but adjacent to it, because he understood in that moment, with sudden and undeniable clarity, what his son was pointing at. Not a grand occasion, not an achievement, not a milestone he had worked toward. This, the garden, the afternoon, the sitting together without anything required of either of them, this was the thing his son valued. This was what his son had been quietly hoping for, and it had been available the entire time. It had been present in the ordinary fabric of all their days, waiting for Daniel to stop running toward the future long enough to notice that what he was running toward was already here, already happening, already asking him to simply be present for it. He had told himself for years he was building something for his family. What he had not seen clearly enough was that the life was not waiting for the foundation to be finished. The life was already in progress. It was happening in the garden and the evenings and the Saturday mornings, and it was happening whether or not he showed up completely for it. His son was going to grow up either way. The question was only whether his father would be genuinely present for the growing. In the months that followed that afternoon, Daniel made a number of changes that looked small from the outside and felt enormous from the inside. He started leaving the office at an hour that still had daylight in it. He started having dinner with his family without his phone on the table. He started being in rooms in his own house in the evening, without an agenda, without the device, without the background processing of the things that still needed his attention, and his children, who were not waiting for an announcement or a change of policy, simply began to include him more naturally in the texture of their days, as if they had always known he would find his way back when he was ready. He learned, slowly and with real effort, to let the garden be enough, to let the dinner table be enough, to let a Saturday morning doing nothing particular with the people he loved be not a deviation from the real work, but the real work itself. He did not leave the business or become someone unrecognizable. The drive that had built the thing was real, and it remained. But something in the structure of his priorities shifted, quietly and permanently, in the direction of the garden. He began protecting those afternoons, the way he had previously protected his most critical meetings, not always successfully, but with the knowledge that this too was irreplaceable and would not wait indefinitely. The life that had been waiting for him in the garden became, slowly, the life he was actually living. There is a part of you that has been watching all of this, the tally, the performance, the measuring and the exhaustion, and the moments of surprising grace when the measuring went quiet. Something in you has been observing all of it without being entirely captured by it, not judging, not prescribing, yes, watching, just present to what is happening, with a steadiness that the content of what is happening does not seem to disturb. Some traditions call this the witness self, the part of you that can observe your thoughts without being identical to your thoughts, that can watch the anxiety without becoming the anxiety, that can hear the inner critic without signing off on the verdict. It is not a detached or cold self. It is simply the awareness that is present before any evaluation begins, and that remains present after the evaluation has passed, unchanged by the content of what it observed. The quiet, steady, undramatic knowing that you are here, that experience is occurring, that witnessing is taking place without being captured by what is witnessed. You can find it right now, not by constructing it, because you cannot build what was already there, but by noticing what in you is aware of this moment, not the thoughts this moment generates, not the feelings moving through, but the awareness itself. The simple, unremarkable knowing that something is happening, that you are here, that part is the part we are pointing towards, and that part carries no tally. That part has never issued a verdict. That part is, in the most fundamental sense available, the actual ground. The witness does not argue with the tally. It simply knows, with a steadiness that requires no defending, that the tally is not the final word. It knows this not because it has been convinced by argument. It knows this because it is itself the evidence, the undeniable first-person fact of a self that exists prior to any score, prior to any result, prior to any review. The awareness present before the measurement begins, and still present after the measurement has been forgotten. That is the thing that cannot be taken. That is the constant underneath all the variables.
Now, consider comparison, because comparison deserves its own honest moment. For most people, comparison is the primary engine that keeps the tally running, the automatic and continuous measurement of where you stand relative to other people. The comparison trap is not a character flaw. It is a structural feature of a social species wired over hundreds of thousands of years to assess relative standing as a matter of survival. It was built for a world where the comparison pool was a small community of people whose private lives were as visible to you as their public ones, where you knew not only how your neighbor appeared to be doing, but also what kept them up at night, and where they had quietly failed. The comparison pool is now global and systematically curated. You are measuring yourself against the carefully filtered public presentations of millions of people, none of whose private experience of doubt and inadequacy is visible to you in any accurate form. You bring to the exchange your full interior life in all its complexity, and you compare it to their exterior presentation in all its strategic incompleteness. And you draw conclusions about your standing from a comparison structurally designed to make you feel insufficient. You will lose this comparison every time, not because you are less, because the game is rigged in that direction. And the people whose lives look most complete from the outside are themselves conducting the same exchange in the other direction, feeling the familiar, privately held ache of inadequacy. No one is exempt. Everyone has a 3 a.m. Everyone has the conversation they cannot stop replaying. And most of them, if you sat with them honestly late at night, would tell you a story you recognize entirely. What does it look like to live from a more settled ground? Not from the perfected state of someone who has solved the worth problem permanently, because that person does not exist, but from the ordinary, imperfect, recoverable practice of returning again and again to the knowledge that the ground is there. Like pausing before you say yes to ask the actual question, not will this make me look good, but do I actually want this? And then, sometimes, saying no, without extended apology, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value is not located in their availability. It looks like receiving a compliment and saying thank you. Just that, allowing it to land, allowing that someone meant what they said, and that what they said was true. Not because you need the compliment, but because refusing it is a form of dishonesty about the evidence. Someone observed something real and said so. You can receive it. You are allowed. It looks like being in a room and not auditing your own performance in real time, just being a person, having a conversation, trusting that the conversation has value regardless of how you are received at each moment, trusting that your presence is sufficient without the constant management that conditional worth requires.
It looks like resting without earning it first, sitting in a garden on a Saturday afternoon and meaning it, not as a scheduled recovery period, but as a direct expression of being a person who is allowed to simply exist without producing. Because you are. Because the living is not the gap between the achievements. The living is the thing, and the resting is part of the living. It looks like making a mistake and letting the mistake be the mistake without letting it become a verdict on who you fundamentally are, looking at what happened, understanding it, correcting what can be corrected, and then releasing it from the place in your chest where you are inclined to keep it as ongoing evidence against yourself. The mistake happened. It is information. It is not your identity. It does not travel forward with you as proof. And this is worth saying directly because it is often missed. The harshness of your inner critic is not evidence of your worthlessness. It is the shadow of your investment. It is the shape caring takes when it does not yet know how to rest. The person who replays a difficult conversation 17 times is not fragile or self-indulgent. They are deeply invested in the relationship. The person who cannot sleep before something important is not broken. The work means something real to them. The caring is real. The investment is real. And those things are among the finest things about a person. The inner critic is the shadow of that caring turned sharp by years of misdirection, aimed at worth rather than craft. It can soften, not disappear, because the caring will not disappear, and the critic is the caring's instrument, but soften, and turn from the voice that says you are insufficient to the voice that says you care enough to want to do better. And in that turning, something fundamental and quiet shifts in the experience of being who you are. You can let all of that rest now. You do not need to solve anything tonight. The day is done. You are here. That is enough. Feel the weight of your body. It is held. Your breath is slow now. Your breath is easy. Nothing is required of you in this moment. Your worth is not something to maintain tonight. It is simply here. You are already whole, exactly as you are. The measuring has stopped. Let it stay stopped. You gave what you could today. That was enough. Nothing is overdue. Nothing needs defending right now. The tally is quiet. You are not the tally. You are the one who was there, underneath it, all along. Just here, just breathing, just alive. There is only one of you. There has only ever been one. And that one is enough. Tonight, as you are. The world will be there tomorrow. Let it wait. You are loved, not for what you do, for what you are. Let that be true tonight. Just let it be true. You have always been enough. You will wake still knowing this. The night is very still now. Whatever sounds remain are soft and distant, the ordinary sound of a world that has settled into its dark and unhurried version of itself. Your body is heavy with a heaviness that is not burden but release, the weight of a day setting itself down at last, finding the rest it could not find while it was still in motion. Your breath has found its own slow rhythm, and you are somewhere between one state and another, between the knowing and the not knowing, between here and the gentler place that sleep opens like a door without a lock.
There is a kind of dark that holds everything, not the dark of loss or absence, but the full and quiet and complete dark of a night that has room for all of it and requires nothing in return. You are in that dark now. You are held in it. You are part of it. And into it you can go, carrying nothing but your breath and the soft knowledge settling into you now like something that was always true and is only now being fully received, that you are enough, that you have always been enough, that you will wake when morning comes still whole, still you, still the rare and unrepeatable and quietly extraordinary thing that you have always been and will always be.